Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a lot to cover. So much went down today, right before the show, last night after our show. There's a lot to cover. We're going to start off as we have been in the NBA, as the Boston Celtics are the first team to punch their ticket to the NBA Finals, trying to get that Larry O'Brien trophy, the second time that they have made it in the last 3 years. We will go ahead and talk about that and then talk about their path. Some people are saying it's the easiest path ever. We'll see what some of the numbers say and talk about that as well. So that's our first two segments. We're then going to transition into hockey as a hat trick from Jason Robertson last night powers the Stars past the Oilers for a 2-1 series lead. We'll talk about that game, how it went the first period on, and really everything that went through there. In the fourth segment, we're going to talk about the big second day in a row with some breaking news out of baseball. Angel Hernandez, the infamous umpire, is officially retiring effective immediately. We'll talk about the backstory, how his reign of terror, I guess you could call it, across the strike zone of the MLB has gone, and we'll talk about the backstory for that. And then we're going to finish off our show with the NFL. They're talking about overhauling the whole offseason. There's also some breaking wide receiver news that we will get to today at the end of the show, so stick around for that. But before we get into the Celtics, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, go ahead and leave a comment. Go ahead and leave a message at gsmcpodcast.net. I appreciate anything you do give, and I appreciate you sticking around and talking some sports with me on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we're going to start off our show today with the biggest news in sports. The Celtics, the Boston Celtics, sweep the Pacers, advance to the NBA Finals. This is, as I said in the intro here, the second finals for the Celtics in the last 3 years. They obviously made it against the Warriors just a couple years ago, and that didn't work out too well for them. They're still looking for their first World Series, not World Series, first NBA championship win in this era, you should say, in this Jason Tatum era. They've been very good. They've made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, I believe, 5 times in this era. It's a question of whether or not they can get over the hump at this point. It most likely, it seems like they're going to be playing the Pacers. They just beat the Pacers. It seems like they're going to be playing the Mavericks as they're up 3-0, and we'll see if that officially goes through tonight. But the path that they've taken to get to the Pacers, and we'll talk about the Pacers here first. This was a very interesting series, right? On paper, and before this whole playoff started, it'd be a disappointment if the Celtics didn't make the finals, right? So they've lived up to expectations here, at least my expectations at a minimum, is that they made the finals. So they've made the expectations. At least in my opinion, it won't be a disappointment of a season now. So they've avoided that at a minimum. But this Pacers series is fascinating to me because this Pacers team, without their star, at home, played 2 of the tightest games that they've lost. 3 of these games 1, 3, and 4, you could make the argument that they should have won. Right? Game 1, definitely they should have won. If they could have inbounded the ball, if they didn't turn the ball over right at the very end, or if if Jaylen Brown doesn't make that incredible 3-point shot from the corner, they should have won that game. There's so many things that went right for the Celtics in that game. Maybe 1-0 Pacers there. Game 2, they just lost. The Celtics were better than them. Tyrese Halliburton's injury stopped any kind of comeback effort that they would have had. Game 3 at home, it seemed like they were going to win. They were up by 18. They blow that lead. They have an opportunity down 1, and they turn the ball over. Jrue Holiday picks their pockets, and then they get an open shot to send it to overtime, and it just doesn't go in. The ball bounces the wrong way, it doesn't go in. they're down 3-0 now instead of it being a 2-1 series. And game 4, the final one, the sweep, the game that solidified the sweep here, they again keep it close down the stretch. They're down 3, they get a possession, they miss that shot once again to go to overtime, or not, they turn the ball over yet again. And the Celtics have a shot, they miss it, the Pacers can't get a rebound, and then they don't foul, which is kind of shocking to me. That was I don't like how the Pacers handle late game situations. They had the worst closing sequences that I've seen, especially in a conference finals. You can't be having 3 games that you kind of let slip through your fingers just the way you play in the last minute. And a lot of it goes back to turnovers. I mentioned in game 1 and 3 that they turned the ball over at the end that kind of sealed the deal, and it happened again in game 4. It wasn't quite and those crucial possessions. They were missing a lot of shots down the stretch, but they were also turning the ball over. There were about 3 possessions in a row with about 2 minutes to go left in the game where they just turned the ball over. And the Celtics also weren't being very safe with the ball, which was helping them stay in the game. But the Pacers, if they just didn't turn the ball over in the fourth quarter in 3 of these games, we might be talking about the Celtics with their back to the walls right now. And that is a drastically different turn to the series than what obviously has occurred, right? Now, Tyrese Halliburton goes out, and it's a question of how long they can keep this up. But the pace that they were playing at and the way that Celtics were kind of matching their energy, they weren't really playing that lockdown defense until the fourth quarter that we know the Celtics can play. I mean, they got two all defensive team players in their starting 5. And they did this without Kristaps Porzingis, someone who I thought the Celtics would like to get back in this series just so he can get his feet wet so he isn't rusty for the game 1 of the finals against presumably the Mavericks. You expect him to be back then. Hamstrings are a nasty injury. They're one of those things that they just keep nagging you. They go on for a very, very long time. So we don't know when he actually will be back. I expect him to be ready by 2 weeks from now, which is when the finals are going to start. But we'll have to see what happens there. The more crucial thing is their defense down the stretch, and I'm going to go and do a little presuming, a little bit of guessing here that the Mavericks are going to be the team out of the West here. So we're going to talk about how they match up with them a little bit. They come out of this series against the Pacers, who offensively, sure, they can be a match for the Mavericks, right? You kind of have experience putting up enough points to do it. But the Mavericks are a lot more physical defensively, especially with the trade deadline acquisitions of PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford. These guys came in and they immediately made a difference. I mean, you could see it right away. Right from that trade deadline, they were out of the playoffs at that point, or they were in the play-ins, I don't remember, but they weren't a 5 seed, They were in danger of missing the playoffs. They go and make this trade. Their defense before it was abysmal, near the bottom of the league. They come in and it immediately makes their defense more physical. They immediately start going on a win streak. Luka starts putting up insane monster numbers. I mean, he was doing that all season anyway, but he starts putting up more numbers than he was before. This is a team that is kind of like the Pacers, except they have stars. And you can make the argument that Tyrese Halliburton is a star, but he's in no way a star when you compare him to Luka Doncic or Kyrie Irving. At least the way that he was. He often doesn't take that shot in the moment that your number one go-to guy seems to be. At least that's what I was noticing for him. He kind of loses some confidence sometimes when he goes through a bad shooting stretch and he's a little more passive, which is fine. He's a point guard. He needs to be able to pass the ball. But at some point, you also need to be assertive when you are the guy on your team. But Luka is a guy, and we've seen it just a couple games ago when he hit that clutch 3 to win the game over Rudy Gobert, Defensive Player of the Year. And I know that's a mismatch in Luka's favor, but still, you have to hit a 3-pointer. You have to shake him at the perimeter, hit it over a 7'4" guy. That's not an easy thing to do. Rudy Gobert, even if he is out of position, is big, tall, and long enough that sometimes that he can come and make that shot, a little bit uncomfortable for you either way, right? So he had to hit that shot, and he makes it. He's a clutch player, right? He's one of the most clutch players in the league. Kyrie obviously has a history of making those clutch shots. In the finals, game-winning shot to help that 3-1 comeback when he was on the Cavs. This is a team that won't have issues closing like the Pacers did. And like I was saying before, if the Pacers could close these games effectively, there's a realistic shot that this series is 2-2, maybe even 3-2 at this point. Or maybe even 3-1 in favor of the Pacers at this point. So a lot of things can happen, and you can't continue to play sloppy basketball. And I know they were really pushing the pace because that's the way the Pacers play and the way the Celtics play. So it kind of just exponentially kept getting faster and faster and faster when they got into a groove, and that leads to more turnovers, more sloppy play, which is what we saw. And when the game got slowed down, the Celtics were able to recenter themselves and make those stops when they needed to. But the Mavericks are a team that will convert in the clutch, have the ability to close out games, and that's something that the Pacers were unable to do. So it's going to be a little bit of a harder job for the Celtics here. The Celtics advanced to the finals. They were the best team in the East by far. And in our next segment here, we're going to do a little bit of talking about their entire run to the finals so far. There's been a lot of media claims saying that the Celtics had the easiest path ever to the finals. So we're going to go through some numbers, and I know numbers don't tell the whole story, but we're going to go through some numbers talking about whether or not they really had the easiest path ever to the finals in the history of the NBA. So stick around for that. We will be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.